The morning Claire Navarro walked into Harlow County General Hospital for the first time. The sky outside was still a pale, washed-out gray. It was the kind of early hour that most people slept through, but Claire had been awake since 4. Old habits. She had pressed her scrubs the night before, set her badge on the edge of the sink so she wouldn't forget it, and eaten a bowl of oatmeal standing at the kitchen counter of the small rental house she'd moved into 3 weeks ago. She had done all of it in silence, in the dark, with the calm and economy of someone who had learned long ago that mornings don't wait for you. She was 34 years old. She stood 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a lean, careful posture that came not from vanity but from training, the kind of physical discipline that lives in the muscles long after the uniform comes off. Her hair was dark brown, worn in a tight bun at the base of her neck. She wore no makeup except a little mascara, mostly out of habit from the days when she wore it to look less intimidating to frighten people in terrible places. She had dark eyes that didn't miss much, and a way of moving through a room, quiet, deliberate, aware, that some people found reassuring and others found unnerving. Harlow, Tennessee was a small town, 40,000 people, give or take, tucked into a fold of the Cumberland Plateau about an hour east of Nashville. There was a tire plant on the south side and a community college on the north. The hospital sat in the middle of town like a small institution trying very hard to feel like a big one, 2 buildings, 4 floors, a trauma bay that handled anything short of major surgery, and a cardiac unit that had won a regional award 2 years running. The staff was mostly local, people who had grown up in Harlow, gone to UT or Vanderbilt or the community college, and come back because this was home. Claire was not from Harlow. She had grown up in San Antonio. She had joined the United States Navy at 18 and spent the next 12 years becoming someone most people couldn't quite believe existed. She had trained as a corpsman, a Navy medic, and she had been good enough, disciplined enough, and tough enough to be selected for an assignment that changed everything. For 6 years, she had served as a combat medic attached to special operations units, including 2 full rotations embedded with SEAL Team 6, officially known as the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. She had worked in places she still could not name out loud. She had kept people alive in conditions that most emergency room doctors had never imagined. She had performed surgical procedures in the dark, in the mud, with the sound of gunfire close enough to feel in her sternum, and she had brought people home. She had also buried some. She left the Navy at 32, not because she was pushed out, and not because she couldn't handle it anymore, but because something had shifted in her after a particular night in a particular country she would never name, and she had decided that the next chapter of her life would be about building things up instead of holding them together in the dark. She enrolled in an accelerated nursing program, earned her RN in 16 months, scored in the top 3% of her licensing exam, and applied for a position at Harlow County General because a former Navy colleague had settled nearby and told her the hospital was solid, the town was quiet, and the pace of life would do her good. She did not put the full story of her service on her application. She listed her years as a Navy corpsman. She listed her certifications, and there were many, more than most nurses accumulate in a lifetime. She did not mention the classified deployments, the special operations attachments, or the nature of the work she had done. That wasn't unusual. Most people who had served in those roles didn't talk about it. The security agreements were real, but so was something quieter, a sense that the work belonged to another world, and that dragging it into this one wouldn't serve anyone. She was hired as a staff nurse on the 3rd floor general medical surgical, mostly post-op and cardiac recovery patients. It was a step down from the intensity she was used to, and she knew that. She had chosen it deliberately. She wanted to start slow. She wanted to learn the rhythms of a civilian hospital. She wanted, for the first time in a very long time, to simply be somewhere long enough to know the faces. What she had not accounted for was Donna Price. Donna was the charge nurse on the 3rd floor, and she had been working at Harlow County General for 19 years. She was a large woman with a brisk manner, short auburn hair, and a way of speaking that suggested she had already made up her mind about most things before the conversation began. She was not a cruel person, not exactly, but she was territorial in the way that people become when they have built their entire sense of self around one place and one role, and they feel that place and role threatened by anything new. Claire Navarro was very new. On Claire's first morning, Donna pulled her aside at the nursing station before the shift briefing had even begun. "You're the new travel hire," Donna said. It was not a question. "Staff hire," Claire said. "I'm permanent." Donna's expression suggested she had heard that before and did not believe it. "How long have you been a nurse?" "I completed my RN 14 months ago." Donna's eyebrows went up just slightly, but Claire caught it. 14 months, Donna repeated. "And before that?" "Navy Corpsman, 12 years. Donna looked her up and down the way someone might look at a piece of furniture they weren't sure they had room for. "Well, corpsman training and nursing are two different things. You'll find that out quickly. We run a very specific operation here. I don't have time to hold anyone's hand." "I'm not asking for anyone's hand," Claire said. Donna looked at her for a moment, something flickering in her eyes that might have been surprise or annoyance, and then turned back to the briefing room. "Let's go, then. Try to keep up." The shift itself was not unkind to Claire. She moved through it the way she moved through everything, carefully, efficiently, without drama. She was assigned 6 patients, which was standard. She assessed each one thoroughly, documented accurately, administered medications on schedule, and communicated clearly with the attending physicians. She asked one question about the hospital's electronic charting system, a different platform from the one she'd trained on, and figured it out in about 12 minutes. What she noticed, as the day went on, was the way the other nurses watched her. Not with open hostility, but with a particular kind of sideways attention that she recognized from her early days in the military. The attention that says, "We haven't decided about you yet." There were 4 other nurses on the floor that day. Bate, who was cheerful and kind and kept offering Claire coffee she didn't need. Marcus, a quiet man in his 40s who had been at the hospital for 11 years and said very little but missed nothing. Young Kayla, 26, fresh out of Vanderbilt, who asked Claire where she had trained in a tone that was politely skeptical. And Sandra, who was Donna's close friend, and who had apparently been told something about Claire before Claire even arrived, because she greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At 11 in the morning, Claire was in the room of a patient named Mr. Elwood Cates, 71 years old, post-op hip replacement, recovering well but anxious about his blood pressure, which had been running a little high since the previous evening. Claire was reviewing his chart and talking to him about his sodium intake when Donna appeared in the doorway. "Navarro," Donna said, "Bed 7 needs a Foley catheter. Kayla's got too much on her hands." "I'll be done here in 5 minutes," Claire said. "I said now," Donna said. There was a small silence. Mr. Cates looked from Donna to Claire with the mild alarm of a man who didn't want to cause trouble. Claire closed the chart. She looked at Donna steadily. "Mr. Cates and I were in the middle of a care conversation," she said. "I'll be down to bed 7 in 5 minutes." She said it without edge, without apology, and without blinking. Then she turned back to Mr. Cates and continued talking. Donna left, but Claire noticed, when she passed the nursing station later, that Donna said something to Sandra in a low voice, and Sandra glanced at Claire and shook her head slowly, the way people do when they've confirmed something they suspected. The talk started in the break room. It always starts in the break room. Claire heard it 3 days later, not because anyone said it to her face, but because she came back from the supply closet earlier than expected and caught the tail end of a conversation that stopped very suddenly when she came through the door. She had heard enough of it. Former military, but only corpsman level. That's like an EMT with extra steps. Donna says she's got more certifications than experience. That's actually a red flag, not a green one. I don't know, she seems a little intense, like she's waiting for something bad to happen. That's what they train them for, but this isn't a battlefield. Claire poured herself a cup of coffee, said a quiet good morning to Kayla, who had the grace to look uncomfortable, and went back to her patients. She did not say anything, she did not explain herself, she went back to work. That was the thing about Claire Navarro that the people of Harlow County General did not yet understand. She had been evaluated under conditions that would have broken most people. She had been tested in darkness and cold and fear and grief, and she had come through each time not because she was unfeeling, but because she had learned something that most people never get the chance to learn, that what other people think of you has almost nothing to do with who you actually are. She could wait. She had waited in places far harder than this. Her second week brought a new test. A patient came in on a Tuesday afternoon, a woman named Marguerite Holloway, 63, diabetic, brought in by her daughter after a fainting spell at home. She was assigned to Claire's section. When Claire reviewed her chart and did her initial assessment, something nagged at her. The official intake notes listed the cause as likely dehydration and low blood sugar. The patient's glucose was indeed low. But Claire looked at the woman's skin, a particular grayish undertone around the mouth, and listened to her heart with her stethoscope for a few seconds longer than usual, and she felt something. She flagged it for Dr. Rennick, the attending on duty. Dr. Rennick was 48, had been at Harlow for 6 years, and was respected but not particularly patient. He looked at Claire over his glasses when she approached him. "I'd like to request an EKG on Mrs. Holloway," Claire said. "Bed 12. Her glucose is 48. She presented with a syncopal episode. She's been rehydrated and her levels are coming up." "I know, but her color is a little off and her pulse feels irregular. It could be Korsman," he said, and she heard the same tone Donna used, that particular emphasis that turned her title into a diminishment. "We've got a clear presentation here. Hypoglycemic syncope. She's responding to treatment. I'd still like to request. I'll order one if the clinical picture changes." He turned back to his chart. "Keep monitoring her." Claire went back to Marguerite's room. She sat at the bedside for a moment, talking to the woman gently, asking her about her week, her symptoms over the past few days. Marguerite told her she'd been feeling tired for about 10 days, that she'd had some neck pain she thought was from sleeping funny, that she'd felt a strange fluttery feeling in her chest 3 times in the past week, but hadn't thought to mention it because she figured it was stress. Claire went back to the nursing station and ordered the EKG herself. Under the standing order protocol the hospital had in place for nurses with advanced clinical concerns. She documented her reasoning clearly. She called the cardiology tech and said she needed it within the hour. Donna was at the station. She looked up. "Did Rennick order that?" "The protocol allows a nurse-initiated EKG with documented clinical concern," Claire said. "I've documented it." Donna's jaw tightened. "He's not going to like that." "He doesn't have to like it," Claire said. "He has to look at the results." The EKG showed a degree heart block. It was a serious finding, an electrical problem in the heart that explained everything. The fatigue, the neck pain, the fluttering, the fainting. Left untreated, it could cause sudden cardiac arrest. Marguerite Holloway was transferred to the cardiac unit within the hour. A pacemaker was implanted 2 days later. Her cardiologist, a quiet man named Dr. Park who had trained at Johns Hopkins, came to the nursing station afterward and asked who had flagged the case. Marcus, who had watched the whole thing unfold, pointed at Claire. Dr. Park found her at the medication cart. "That was a good catch," he said simply. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and walked away. Donna said nothing. Dr. Rennick said nothing, not to Claire, but she heard through Marcus that he had quietly reviewed the protocol she'd used and found it entirely correct. Marguerite's daughter came to the floor on the third day. She was a woman in her early 40s, red-eyed from crying, holding a small bouquet of flowers that seemed inadequate for what she was feeling. She found Claire and stood in front of her in the hallway for a moment like she was searching for words large enough. "They told me," the daughter said. "They told me that if it had gone another day or two," she stopped, started again. "Thank you, I don't thank you." Claire squeezed her hand. "Your mother is going to be just fine," she said. And she meant it. She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who had seen real loss and knew that this was not it. But the moment did not change the climate of the floor, the way you might expect. If anything, it made certain things worse. Because when someone new and quiet turns out to be right about something important, it does one of two things to the people around them. It either opens a door or it locks one. For Donna Price, it locked one. Donna began assigning Claire the hardest patients, not in the way that good charge nurses challenge strong staff, but in the way that people try to bury someone under work, hoping they'll crack. Claire took on the assignments without complaint. She managed them all. She documented everything. She was never late, never sloppy, never unprofessional. She also began to notice other things. A medication error in the chart that had been initialed by someone she couldn't identify, corrected quietly but never reported. A pattern of rushed handoffs on the overnight shift that left morning staff without adequate information. A piece of equipment in room 8 that had been tagged as service but whose readings Claire didn't trust, because she had worked with enough equipment in enough conditions to know when something felt off. She mentioned the equipment to Donna. Donna told her it had been checked. She mentioned it to the floor supervisor, a man named Gerald, easygoing to the point of near uselessness, who said he'd look into it. 2 weeks passed. The equipment was still in room 8. And then one evening, near the end of Claire's third week, she was walking to her car in the hospital parking lot when she heard two nurses she didn't know well talking near the entrance. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She was simply walking, and the evening was quiet, and their voices carried. "Did you hear about the new nurse, the military one? The one who thinks she's something special?" A short laugh. "Donna says she's going to be a problem, says she doesn't know how to work as part of a team, that she's got a hero complex." A pause. "That's a shame. She seems okay to me." "Well, Donna's been here 20 years. If she says someone's a problem, usually she's right." Claire kept walking. She unlocked her car, sat down in the driver's seat, and looked through the windshield at the parking lot lights. She sat there for about 60 seconds. Then she started the car and drove home. That night she made herself a simple dinner, rice and black beans, the same thing she'd eaten in more difficult places than this, and sat at her kitchen table and thought about what she was doing here. Not in any dramatic crisis of faith way, just honestly, quietly. She had come to Harlow to build something, to use what she knew in a way that helped people in the daylight instead of the dark. She had not come to fight a charge nurse's insecurities or prove herself to a break room. She had not come to be liked. She had come to do the work. And the work so far was asking more of her than she had expected, not the medical part, which she handled as easily as breathing, but the human part, the waiting, the being misread, the knowing that the people around her had constructed a version of her in their heads that had almost nothing to do with who she actually was, and that correcting that version was not something she could do quickly or directly. She washed her bowl, she set her alarm for 4, she went asleep. 6 weeks into her tenure at Harlow County General, a man named Dale Hurst was admitted to the 3rd floor. He was 57, a former corrections officer from Clarksville, recovering from a knee surgery that had gone fine but left him irritable and bored. He was large, loud, and had a way of talking to the female nurses that most of them had learned to navigate through a combination of patience and strategic avoidance. He called them sweetheart and hun, regardless of how many times they gave their names. He complained about everything: the food, the TV signal, the temperature of the room, and he had a habit of hitting the call button repeatedly and then acting surprised when someone arrived. Claire was assigned to him on his second full day. She went in with her usual calm. She introduced herself by name, took his vitals, reviewed his chart, asked him how he was feeling. He told her she looked young to be a nurse. She said she was 34. He said she looked younger, as if that were a compliment requiring acknowledgement. She said she'd let him know when his pain medication was due and turned to make a note. "Hey," he said, "I asked Dr. Fitch about getting the stronger stuff, the oxy. He said he'd check, but no one's told me anything." "Dr. Fitch typically manages that on rounds," Claire said. "I can make a note for him." "Yeah, but I want to know why I'm not on it already. I had knee surgery. That's painful." "Your current protocol is working to manage your pain at a level that's safe given your blood pressure history," Claire said. "If Dr. Fitch decides it's appropriate to adjust, he will." Hurst's eyes narrowed. "You doctors and nurses, you all stick together. Man tells you he's in pain and you just write it down." "I hear that you're uncomfortable," Claire said. "I'm taking it seriously. I've made the note." She left. She had seen this before. Men in pain who directed it outward. She didn't take it personally. But the following morning, he said something different. She was adjusting his IV line when he said, without looking at her, "You know, I heard you were some kind of military hotshot. Corpsman or something." She didn't respond. "Navy," he said. "That's the soft branch, right, where they let women in." She finished adjusting the line. "Your line looks good," she said. "Press the call button if you need anything." "I'm just saying," he said. "It's not real combat. It's not like being a soldier. And then they come here and act like they know more than everyone else." Claire looked at him for a moment, just a moment. "Mr. Hurst," she said, "I'm going to do my job for you as well as I possibly can, and I'm going to ask you to do one thing in return." "What's that?" "Let me," she said. She left the room. She didn't report him. She didn't complain. She managed his care for 3 more days with the same steady professionalism she gave every patient, made sure his pain was being appropriately reviewed, and when he left on the 4th day, he did not say thank you, but he also did not say the other things. It was Marcus who told her, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, what was actually happening. They were in the break room alone, Marcus eating his lunch with the careful deliberateness of a man who took his 30 minutes seriously, and Claire was refilling her water bottle. She wasn't going to say anything. She rarely initiated personal conversations at work. But Marcus looked at her and said, plainly, "You know what Donna put in your informal review, right?" Claire looked at him. "I wasn't aware there had been one." "It's not official, but she talked to Gerald, and Gerald talked to HR." Marcus took a measured bite of his sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. "She said you have difficulty integrating with team culture." A beat of silence. "She said you go around attending physicians to initiate procedures." "I used the standing protocol," Claire said. "I know you did. I watched you do it correctly." He looked at her. "I'm not telling you this to upset you. I'm telling you because I've been here 11 years and I've watched Donna do this to 3 other nurses she felt were threatening her in some way, and 2 of them left and one of them is still here but wishes she hadn't stayed." Claire leaned against the counter. "Why are you telling me?" "Because you're a good nurse," he said, "and this floor needs good nurses." He paused. "And also because I looked up your certifications when you started, out of curiosity." She said nothing. "TCCC," he said, "the abbreviation for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. Advanced Trauma Life Support, Flight Medic Certification, 3 others I didn't recognize." She still said nothing. "I've been an RN for 16 years, Marcus said. "I've only ever met 2 nurses with that particular combination of certifications. One of them worked with special forces in Afghanistan." He folded his sandwich wrapper carefully. "I'm not asking you anything. I just wanted you to know that at least one person on this floor sees what you are." He stood up, picked up his lunch bag, and headed for the door. He paused at the threshold. "Don't let her push you out," he said. "This place needs more people who do the right thing even when it's inconvenient." He left. Claire stood there for a long moment. Then she finished filling her water bottle and went back to work. The formal complaint came at the end of her 7th week. It was filed by Donna Price and co-signed by Sandra, alleging that Claire had on 3 separate occasions acted outside her nursing scope, created a climate of interpersonal tension on the floor, and demonstrated an unwillingness to accept supervisory guidance. Claire was called into a meeting with Gerald and a woman from HR named Patricia Voss, who was professional and calm and clearly uncomfortable. They sat across from Claire in a small conference room and laid out the allegations one by one. Claire listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not get upset. When they were done, she said, "May I respond?" "Of course," Patricia said. Claire had brought a folder. Inside it were printed copies of every protocol she had used, with the specific standing order highlighted and the documentation she had filed each time. She had a copy of the EKG she had ordered and Dr. Park's written note of acknowledgement. She had a printed timeline of the equipment concern in room 8, the one that had still not been addressed, along with the dates she had flagged it to Donna and to Gerald. She placed these on the table one at a time, explaining each one quietly and clearly. Gerald shifted in his seat. Patricia made notes. "As for the interpersonal tension," Claire said, "I don't have documentation of that because I can't document something I didn't create. What I can tell you is that I have not had a single complaint from a patient. I have not raised my voice to anyone on this floor. I have not refused an assignment, spoken improperly to a physician, or violated any policy." She paused. "If being effective at my job creates tension for someone who feels threatened by that, I'm not sure that's a problem I can solve." There was a long silence. Patricia looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at his hands. "We'll review the documentation," Patricia said. "Of course," Claire said. "One more thing." She slid the equipment log across the table. "The monitor in room 8 has been flagged as a concern for 5 weeks. It still hasn't been serviced. If someone is harmed because of that, I want the record to show that I raised it through proper channels in writing multiple times." She looked at both of them steadily. "That's not a threat. That's a fact." She thanked them for their time and left. The drive home that evening was quiet. The Cumberland Plateau rolled past her window in the late afternoon light, its ridges dark and ancient and entirely indifferent to Donna Price and HR complaints and the small wars of institutional politics. Claire turned on the radio. An old Emmylou Harris song was playing, something about roads and going home, and she drove the rest of the way listening to it without thinking about much at all. She parked in her driveway and sat for a moment. The complaint wasn't what bothered her. She had been investigated under far more serious circumstances, by people with far more power, in situations where the stakes were not a charged nurse's pride but actual life and death. She had come through those things with her integrity intact and her record clean. She would come through this. What bothered her, if she was honest with herself, sitting there in the quiet of her car, in the quiet of her driveway, in the quiet of this small Tennessee town, was the loneliness of it. Not the dramatic, romantic kind. Just the ordinary kind. The kind that comes from spending years doing difficult things in the company of people who understood why those things were difficult, and then finding yourself in a new place where almost no one knows who you are or what you've carried. She got out of the car. She made dinner. She called her brother in San Antonio and listened to him talk about his kids for 20 minutes, and it was the best 20 minutes of her week. She went to bed. She went back in the morning. The morning of November 14th started like every other morning. Claire arrived at 6:45. She poured her coffee from the break room machine, reviewed the overnight notes, took her patient assignments from the board. 8 patients today, 2 more than usual because 2 nurses had called in sick. She didn't object. She mapped out her morning in her head the way she had been mapping out complex operations since she was 22 years old and she went to work. The first 3 hours were unremarkable. Post-op assessments, medication rounds, a family meeting about a patient being transferred to a skilled nursing facility. The third floor of Harlow County General on a Tuesday morning in November, the ordinary machinery of human care, turning steadily along. At 9:47, she heard the first alarm. Not a patient alarm, not the steady beeping of a monitor or the insistent chime of a call button. Something different. A sound she had not heard in 2 years, the heavy percussion of a door being forced somewhere below. She stopped in the middle of the hallway and listened. The hospital had a certain ambient sound to it, a frequency she had learned over 7 weeks the way she had learned the sound profiles of every environment she'd ever worked in. This was not part of that frequency. And then a shout, far away but sharp, from the direction of the main lobby 1 floor below. Claire set down the chart she was holding, walked to the nursing station, and said to Marcus, who was documenting at his computer, "Something's wrong downstairs." Marcus looked up, and then they both heard it clearly, a sound that traveled up through the stairwell, through the walls, up to where they stood. Gunshots. 2 of them, sharp and flat and unmistakable. Then a third. The hospital's overhead intercom crackled to life 9 seconds later. A code, not one of the standard medical codes, a security alert, an active threat. The third floor immediately became a study in contrast. The patients who could hear it and began calling out, and the staff who stood in the hallway for 1 frozen second, uncertain what to do. Claire was not uncertain. She moved to the nursing station and pulled up the hospital's security layout on the desk computer. She had studied the building's floor plan in her first week, as she studied the layout of every new environment she entered, because old habits are old habits. She confirmed what she already suspected. 1 main entrance on the ground floor, stairwells at both ends of each floor, an auxiliary entrance through the loading dock on the south side. She turned to Marcus. "Get everyone into their rooms, patients and staff. Close every door that locks. Pull the privacy curtains all the way across. Anyone who can move under their own power should move away from the door and toward the far window wall." Marcus stared at her for just a fraction of a second. "Okay," he said, and he went. She turned to Kayla, who was standing behind the station wide-eyed. "Find every nurse on this floor and tell them to shelter the patients and stay with them. No one moves in the hallway. No one uses their cell phones out loud." "What's happening?" Kayla asked. "I don't know yet," Claire said, "but I'm going to find out. Go now." Kayla went. Claire walked to the stairwell door at the north end of the floor. She did not open it immediately. She pressed herself to the wall beside it and listened. She could hear 2 voices below. She could not make out words, but she could hear the timbre male, agitated, one of them issuing commands and the other responding. She heard someone crying, a high, frightened sound that was quickly muffled. She heard the stairwell door on the 2nd floor open and close. She stepped back from the wall and thought. She had no radio, no weapon, no backup. She had her training, her knowledge of the building, her medical supplies, and 12 years of staying calm in situations that made other people stop thinking. She went back to the supply room. Here is what had happened downstairs, which Claire would piece together fully only later. 3 men had entered Harlow County General at approximately 9:45 in the morning. They were not random. They were not strangers to each other or to violence. 2 were brothers, Darren and Kyle Marsh, who had escaped from a federal detention center in Kentucky 48 hours earlier while awaiting sentencing on armed robbery and assault charges. The third was a man named Corey Pitts who had driven the car. They had come to the hospital because their mother was a patient there, a woman named Rose Marsh, 61 years old, admitted 3 days earlier with a severe infection following a recent procedure. She was on the second floor. What the Marsh brothers wanted was simple and impossible. They wanted their mother released. They wanted a car and free passage, and they were prepared. They had announced to the security guard at the entrance and the 3 people in the lobby to make that happen by force. They had 2 handguns between the 3 of them. The security guard, a 58-year-old man named Roy Watkins, who had been at the hospital for 10 years, had been struck in the shoulder and was down near the entrance. He was alive. The lobby had been cleared of most people in the first chaotic minute, but 4 individuals had not been able to get out. A hospital volunteer named Sylvia, age 72. A man in a wheelchair named Dennis who was waiting for transport. A young woman named Amanda who was 8 months pregnant and had been at the registration desk. And a floor tech named Jerome who had been mopping near the elevator. These 4 people were now in the lobby with Darren and Corey Pitts. Kyle Marsh had gone upstairs. To the second floor. To his mother. Claire did not know all of this when she moved from the supply room back toward the stairwell, but she knew enough. She knew there were armed individuals in the building. She knew patients were at risk. She knew that local law enforcement would be responding. She had already seen, through the window at the end of the hall, the first police car in the parking lot. But she also knew, from hard experience, that the first minutes of these situations were the most dangerous, and that most harm happened before anyone with authority arrived. She had done something in the supply room that she had not done in 2 years. She had switched the part of her brain that had been quietly resting. It came back without drama, like muscle memory, like breathing. She moved down the hallway, room by room, pulling each door closed and confirming with the staff inside that patients were positioned away from the entrance, that call buttons were silenced, that lights were off. She found Bate in room 6 with 2 patients and told her to stay put and use her phone to text, not call, the charge station if anything changed. She found an orderly named Tom near the elevator and redirected him into the clean utility room and told him to stay there and keep the door closed. She heard the second-floor stairwell door from above, no, below, from the second floor, open again. Closer now. She moved to the stairwell door on the north end of the 3rd floor and listened again. Footsteps coming up. One person moving quickly, breathing hard. She positioned herself. The door swung open. A man came through it with a gun in his hand, not pointing it, not yet, because he was moving fast and looking over his shoulder at the same time, and what he ran into, in the half-second it took him to turn forward again, was Claire Navarro. What happened next was not dramatic in the way that movies make these things dramatic. It was fast and quiet and efficient. Claire used a combination of a wrist control technique and a leverage move that she had practiced approximately 4,000 times over the course of her military service, and the gun was on the floor and Kyle Marsh's arm was at an angle that strongly discouraged movement in roughly 2.5 seconds. He was 29 years old and strong, and he made a sound that was part rage and part shock. "Don't," Claire said. She said it the way she said most things, quietly and with complete conviction. "He didn't." "On your stomach," she said, "hands behind your head." He went down. She picked up the gun, confirming the safety with a practiced touch, and stepped back. "Don't move," she said. "I will not hurt you if you do not move." He did not move. She was breathing steadily. Her hands were not shaking. The part of her that had once held people together in the dark was fully awake now, and it was the most alive she had felt in 2 years. The next 22 minutes were the most significant of Claire Navarro's time in Harlow, Tennessee, though she would not think of them that way for quite a while. She secured Kyle Marsh to the stairwell railing using compression bandage wrap from the supply cart, which held remarkably well, and moved to the window at the end of the hall, where she could see the parking lot filling with police vehicles. She used the floor phone at the nursing station, the landline, which was still working, to call the police dispatch number she had memorized during her first week, as she memorized the emergency numbers of every new environment she entered. She gave the operator a precise situation report. Clear, fast, detailed. Current location. Number of floors. Location of known threat. Number of individuals she believed to be in the lobby. Physical description of the individual she had secured on the third floor. Condition of the security guard she had seen from the parking lot window, the position of his body, the way he was holding his shoulder, and her assessment that he was conscious and not in immediate mortal danger. The operator asked her to repeat her name. She did. The operator asked her to describe her level of training. She gave the short version. The operator said, "Ma'am, are you law enforcement?" "No," she said, "I'm a nurse." There was a brief pause. "We have tactical units en route," the operator said. "Can you shelter in place?" "I can," Claire said. "But I need you to know there are 4 civilians in the lobby with 2 armed individuals, and one of the civilians is pregnant." "Understood, that's being relayed." "I also want you to know," Claire said, "that the mother of the men who came in here, Rose Marsh, second floor, is going to be scared and confused and might be used as leverage. She's medically fragile. If your people go to the second floor, she needs to be treated gently." Another pause. "You know the mother." "I don't, but I know what a sick woman in a hospital bed sounds like when she's frightened. Please make sure someone tells her she's not in trouble." The police tactical unit entered Harlow County General at 10:23. Darren Marsh and Corey Pitts surrendered without further violence, in large part because the tactical team's entry was coordinated and complete, but also in part because Darren Marsh had spent the previous 10 minutes watching his brother fail to appear, and had begun to understand that something upstairs had not gone according to plan. Roy Watkins, the security guard, was evacuated and transported to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. His injury was serious but not life-threatening. He would spend 3 weeks recovering and would return to work in January. Amanda, the pregnant woman, was assessed on site and found to be physically unharmed. She was admitted to the labor and delivery floor as a precaution, and her daughter, born healthy, arrived 2 weeks later. Sylvia, the volunteer, had a bruised wrist from falling during the initial chaos. Dennis in the wheelchair was physically fine but badly shaken. Jerome, the floor tech, had protected Amanda during the entire ordeal by standing between her and the men with the quiet, implacable stubbornness of someone who has decided that this is where he makes his stand, and he received a commendation from the hospital board 6 weeks later. Kyle Marsh was taken into custody on the 3rd floor of Harlow County General, secured to the stairwell railing with compression bandage wrap, by a woman he described to police as some kind of nurse. Rose Marsh, when a female officer went to her room on the 2nd floor and explained gently that her sons were alive and in custody, cried for a long time and then asked if someone could please bring her some water. The days that followed were complicated in the way that the aftermath of extraordinary things always is, noisy and strained, and full of adjustments. The local news covered it. The story was straightforward on the surface. Armed fugitives, hospital standoff, quick police response, no fatalities. What made reporters linger? What made the story spread first locally and then, with that unstoppable momentum of social media, to outlets much further away, was the detail about the nurse on the 3rd floor. Claire had not spoken to any reporters. She had given her full statement to the police department and the Federal Marshal's Service and had answered every question they asked, clearly and completely, and then she had asked if she was free to go. They had said yes. She had gone back to the 3rd floor and finished her shift. She was not trying to be dramatic. She was not making a point. She had patients who needed care, and she was their nurse, and that was what she was there to do. But the story of what had happened on the 3rd floor, who had taken down Kyle Marsh, how, with what moved through Harlow County General at the speed of a small institution with thin walls and a staff who talked to their families. And by the time Claire came in the next morning, something in the building had changed. She could feel it the moment she walked through the door. The way people looked at her, not with the sideways skepticism she had grown used to, but with something different. Something direct and startled and, in some cases, openly ashamed. Kayla was the first one who said anything. She was at the nursing station when Claire arrived, and she stood up when she saw her, actually stood up and said, "I owe you an apology." Claire looked at her. "I was one of the people in the break room," Kayla said. "I didn't say it, but I laughed, and I'm sorry." "You don't owe me an apology," Claire said. "You don't know me. You had no reason to." "That's not what you owe me," Claire said, not unkindly, "is just to be a good nurse. That's all any of us owe each other." Kayla blinked, nodded, sat back down. Donna Price did not apologize that day, or the day after. She came in on a Wednesday, the second day after the incident, and moved through the floor with a careful, contained quality that Claire recognized as the specific dignity of a person who has been wrong in a public way and is trying to find the right response. Donna was not a bad person. Claire had known that from the beginning. She was a person who had let fear masquerade as authority, and who was now standing in the rubble of that and trying to figure out what came next. Claire did not make it harder for her. She did not gloat. She did not tell the story. She did not accept the congratulations of the staff with any kind of performance. She accepted them briefly, redirected the conversations back to work, and moved on. On Thursday, Donna appeared in the doorway of the break room while Claire was eating lunch. Claire looked up. Donna stood there for a moment. She was not a woman built for uncertainty, and the uncertainty was visible in the set of her shoulders, and the particular way she was not quite looking at Claire and not quite looking away. "I pulled the personnel file on you," Donna said finally. "The full one, the one from the Navy." Claire said nothing. "I shouldn't have had access to it, and I probably broke 3 HR rules getting it," Donna said. "But I did, and I read it." She paused. "And I sat with it for a while." She came into the break room. She sat down across the table. This was clearly not easy for her. "I don't know exactly what you did over there," Donna said. "The file is, a lot of it is blacked out, but what isn't blacked out is enough." She looked at her hands. "You saved people, a lot of people, and then you came here and I treated you like you were nobody." "You treated me like I was new," Claire said, "which I was." "That's kind of you," Donna said, "but it wasn't just that." She lifted her eyes. "I was threatened by you. I didn't want to admit that, but that's what it was. And I made your life harder because of it, and I'm sorry." Claire looked at her for a long moment. "Apology accepted," she said. Donna exhaled slowly. Then she said something that Claire didn't expect. "The equipment in room 8. I'm having it replaced today." "Good," Claire said. Donna nodded. She stood up. She started to leave. She stopped at the door. "You're a remarkable nurse," she said. "I should have led with that." She left. Claire finished her lunch. The federal marshals came back to speak with her the following week. They wanted a detailed debrief, not the criminal investigation part, which was complete, but a tactical review. They sat with her in a conference room for 2 hours, and she walked them through every decision she had made from the moment she heard the first sound to the moment she secured Kyle Marsh. They were thorough, precise, professional. At the end, one of them looked at her across the table with an expression she recognized. "Ms. Navarro," he said, "I want to ask you something and you don't have to answer." "Go ahead," she said. "When you engaged the subject in the stairwell, the decision to intercept rather than shelter in place, you knew that was a risk. You had a secured floor, staff sheltered, patient safe. You could have stayed put." "I could have," she said. "So why didn't you?" She thought about it for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to say it accurately. "Because staying put meant he kept the gun," she said. And a man with a gun in a hospital stairwell is a danger to every patient and every nurse on every floor above and below him. Sheltering in place protects the people in the room with you. It doesn't protect the next floor. She paused. I couldn't account for where he would go. I could account for where I was, so I made myself useful. The marshal nodded slowly. He looked at his partner, then he looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said, your threat assessment and your response time were both better than most law enforcement officers I know. I had good teachers, she said. Dr. Park, the cardiologist who had been the first to acknowledge her work, stopped by the third floor one afternoon in late November, not for any clinical reason but apparently just to talk. He sat with her in the break room for about 15 minutes. He was a quiet man who chose his words carefully, and she appreciated that. Do you find it strange, he asked, being here, after what you came from? She thought about it. Sometimes, she said. In the beginning, mostly, the pace is different. The stakes feel smaller, but they aren't. No, he agreed, they aren't. Someone's mother gets a pacemaker instead of cardiac arrest, she said. That's not smaller, it's just quieter. He nodded. Why Harlow? She smiled a little. Someone told me the town was quiet and the pace of life would do me good. And has it? She looked out the break room window at the parking lot, at the November light on the Tennessee hills beyond the fence line. Working on it, she said. In December, the hospital board issued a formal commendation for Claire Navarro's actions during the November 14th incident. She received it in a brief ceremony that she had asked them to make as short as possible, and they had agreed, because by this point several people had learned that when Claire Navarro asked for something specific in a particular tone of voice, it was wise to agree. Gerald, the floor supervisor who had absorbed her equipment complaint and done nothing, resigned in November. It was presented as voluntary. Patricia Voss from HR sent Claire a brief email acknowledging that the complaint filed against her in October had been closed and removed from her file. The note was professional and bloodless and entirely inadequate to the situation, but Claire kept it because it was accurate. She received a call in the first week of December from a former colleague, a man she had served with during her second SEAL Team 6 rotation, now working in federal law enforcement. He had seen the news story, which had finally, reluctantly, included her full background after the Marshal's Service declined to comment on the story in several veterans organizations, and former colleagues confirmed what they were permitted to confirm. I thought you were going to disappear quietly into civilian life, he said. I was trying to, she said. He laughed. How's that working out? Getting better, she said, slowly. You should know, he said, that the people who know you, who know what you did over there, what you actually did, are not surprised. Not even a little. She didn't say anything for a moment. Tell them I'm doing fine, she said. I will, he said. Stay safe, Claire. Always, she said. By January, the third floor of Harlow County General had changed in the way that places change after a shared experience. Not dramatically, not in the way of movies, where everything is resolved and permanently altered, and everyone has learned their lesson. Real change is quieter than that. Real change happens in the small moments that accumulate over time, the way water shapes stone. It happened in the way Marcus now included Claire automatically in the informal consultations that had previously been a closed circle. In the way Kayla came to her with clinical questions and actually listened to the answers. In the way Dr. Rennick, who had a complicated relationship with being wrong, had begun addressing her by name instead of by title, which was a small thing and also not a small thing. And it happened in the way Donna Price, who had been the gatekeeper of this floor for 19 years and who was not a bad person, began moving through her days with a little less territorial defensiveness, as if, having been forced to examine herself, she had found something she didn't expect, something she was still working on. Claire noticed all of it. She did not comment on it. She did not require acknowledgement. She had not come to Harlow to be vindicated. She had come to do the work, and the work was here, and it was good work. On a Tuesday in the second week of January, near the end of her shift, Claire went to check on a patient she had been particularly fond of, an 81-year-old man named Harold Birch, retired postal worker, admitted for pneumonia and responding well to antibiotics but frustrated by the slow pace of his recovery. Harold was a talker. He had been everywhere in Harlow for 50 years and knew everyone and everything, and he liked to share all of it with whoever was kind enough to stand still long enough to listen. Claire was always willing to stand still. "I heard about what happened," he said when she came in to take his vitals. "Back in November, what you did." She said, taking his blood pressure. "You're something else," he said. 118/76, she said. "That's excellent, Harold." "Don't change the subject," he said. "I'm trying to tell you something." She lowered the cuff. She looked at him. He was a small man, white-haired, with the kind of face that gets more itself with every decade, more Harold Birch now than he had ever been. "My grandson," he said. "He's 22. He wants to go into medicine, but he doesn't think he's smart enough. Too many years people told him he wasn't." "What kind of medicine?" she asked. "He doesn't know yet. He's just starting." Harold looked at her. "Would you talk to him? Not because you're a hero or whatever they're calling you, but because you know something about doing the work even when nobody believes you can. That's what he needs to hear." Claire looked at him for a long moment. "Tell him to come by," she said. "I've got a lunch break on Thursdays." Harold smiled, a slow, complete smile that reorganized his whole face. "Good," he said. "Good." She adjusted his blanket. She made a note in his chart. She said good night. She walked down the hallway of the third floor of Harlow County General, past the nursing station where Marcus was finishing his documentation, past the break room where Kayla was making tea, past the rooms of the people in her care who were resting, recovering, getting better, and she walked out into the January night. The air was cold and clear. The Cumberland Plateau rose against the dark sky to the east. The parking lot was quiet. A few stars were out. She stood there for a moment, breathing. She had not come to this town to be a hero. She had not come to prove anything to anyone. She had come because she was tired of the dark and ready for something slower, something that grew instead of burned. She had come because there is a time in a life for the extraordinary, and there is a time for the ordinary, and both of them require everything you have, and both of them matter. She had been doubted. She had been underestimated. She had been told in 100 quiet ways that what she carried didn't belong here. But she had done the work. She had kept showing up. She had let who she was speak for itself in its own time, in its own way, and it had spoken clearly when it needed to.